Well, hello and welcome to the APS Stamp Chat. I'm Heidi Rhodes. Today's guest is Dr. Mike Pascoe. Dr. Pascoe is an anatomy professor at the School of Medicine at the University of Colorado. The recent acquisition of his great-grandmother-in-law's stamp collection rekindled his interest in philately. And like a true millennial, he enjoys sharing his passion for the hobby using various social media forms, which you can find on mikepascoe.com. When he is not busy teaching anatomy in person or, of course, remotely these days, he's working towards creating a new philatelic class called Philately. Today's Stamp Chat is sponsored by the APS Education Department. The Education Department of the American Philatelic Society supports its members with education for all levels. Young Stamp Collectors of America for our youngest collectors. Young Philatelic Leaders Fellowship for aspiring young philatelists, and Summer Seminar, a once-a-year opportunity to learn from philatelic experts. Now, in addition, the Education Department offers online learning on the C3A platform. This includes on-demand videos and live workshops that cover a wide variety of philatelic topics. Learning never ends in philately, we know this. So to learn more about what the APS Education Department is offering now, go to stamps.org/education, or go ahead and email education@stamps.org. Now, before we begin tonight's presentation, a few noteworthy items for our live audience. I encourage you to use the chat box liberally. If you have a question, however, for Dr. Pascoe, please use the Q&A box. That will really be helpful. We'll have time at the end of Dr. Pascoe's chat to review them. And now for our future presentation, Start 'em Young, the benefits of stamp collecting for children. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Heidi. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for getting everything set up. And thanks for all the time you've dedicated toward getting me here today. And I'm really glad to share my story with you. I want you to learn more about starting them young. How can we get young children excited and involved in stamp collecting? So let's get rolling here. And as Heidi's mentioned, I'm Mike Pascoe, and I'm an academic. I have a PhD, which means you go to school long enough, they'll give you a fancy title. And I really, as was mentioned in the intro, I like to share a lot of what I'm doing around philately on social media. So there's my Twitter handle. If you're into Twitter, you can check me out there. And it's a way for us to keep the conversation going once this presentation's over. And I thought I would introduce myself and give you a little bit more about where I'm coming from, my background in philately, and just more about me. I think that's helpful when you're listening to a presentation. I'll keep it brief. So I am an alumnus of the University of Colorado. So here's my favorite postage stamp of a buffalo. We won't get into the buffalo bison argument. I am a CU buff, and so go Buffs. I did all of my academic training there in Boulder, Colorado. And from that time on, I've been teaching anatomy, and I get to teach anatomy again at the University of Colorado. And I really get to work a lot with physical therapy students, PA, also medical students, and I get to help them understand how the body is put together. So that's my day job, if you will. And in addition to living in Colorado, I'm a native of Colorado. You know that you can probably tell from my accent, or really lack of an accent, that I'm from Colorado. And I'm gonna do some skiing this season. I'm gonna learn how to ski, and so I'm hoping to be able to do what this person on this stamp is doing right now. I think I'll be able to do it with just a few lessons. And I've been a stamp collector from a young age. I'll talk about that background in just a little bit, but that's a big part of who I am and why I'm here today. I enjoy stamp collecting. I have 2 mini schnauzers. I was real excited to see mini schnauzers on a postage stamp. That sounds like a really interesting topical area. And then I'm married. I've been married since 2009 to my wife, Stephanie. And this is the wedding stamp that was put out in the United States in that year. Big event in my life. And I really love to run. I mean, being in Colorado, you almost have to be active. And especially where I live in Boulder County, there's a lot of great running trails. So I do like to keep active that way. And then another big part of my life is my faith. So I will put that in there as well. And all of these stamps together are a good representation of who Mike Pascoe is. So as a true academic, I am going to lead off our session with objectives. So at the end of this session, my hope is that you'll be able to do the following things. Just as I'm going to reflect on my experience with stamp collecting, I want you to reflect on your experience with stamp collecting. Maybe you have a youth experience as well, and I want you to reflect on that. And maybe you're coming to this presentation because you already engage youth in stamp collecting. So I want you to be able to have some time during this talk to reflect on that experience and kind of think about it intentionally and go a little bit deeper. I also want you to be able to list off a couple of reasons why stamp collecting is beneficial for youth. So this is the big why question, like we're doing this, we want our children to do this, why would we invest this time? And then I think a third objective sounds reasonable with the time that we have. I want you to name some examples of activities and resources that are available to those of us that want to engage youth in stamp collecting. So those are the big three. That's how the talk will be presented in three parts. And if you're getting ready to feverishly write down everything that's on the slides, I'll save you some time. The slides are going to be made available. You could download them right now using this URL. And if you're not familiar with the short URL, it is case sensitive. So you're going to want to type that in exactly as it is. I'll make sure that this URL appears again later at the end of the talk, but it's Pascoe Stamp Chat, case sensitive, of course. So those are the objectives, and let's go ahead and get started and dig into this topic. So I thought it would be good to just have a moment to pause and reflect on, what is my background with stamp collecting, and then have you consider what this looked like for yourself. And then also, what is my story and my experience with introducing my daughters to stamp collecting. So let's go ahead and get started. And these two images kind of represent some of my earliest memories of stamp collecting. So I really remember getting involved in stamp collecting in the early 90s. I was about 10 years old at the time, and I picked a duck hunting stamp. Duck hunting stamps, I didn't know much about them, but I saw them a lot. I saw them a lot in my mother's collection. My mother got me into stamp collecting, and my grandpa, mom's dad, was a hunter. So he every year would get the waterfowl hunting stamp. And I think this was one of the first experiences and exposures I had to viewing these types of images on stamps. It got me really interested in, what was the purpose? What does a stamp have to do with duck hunting and things like that? So this is an image, this is a stamp that's always really stayed in my mind, and it has a strong family connection, right? It represents my mom and her exposing me to the hobby, and it represents my grandfather as well. And I think that's what makes stamp collecting real exciting, right? Is those personal connections that we have beyond these pieces of paper. And then the Scott Pony Express album. So soon after I was introduced by my mother, it was time to, start collecting and go from that phase of accumulating and hoarding stamps to actually organizing them. So everyone can probably remember their first stamp album. And for me, it's the Pony Express. So this is a lot of what the early 90s looked like for me. Whenever there was time and there was a shoebox of stamps that were pulled off of envelopes, or I should say cut off of envelopes, they were given a bath in the bowl of warm water. This is, of course, the soaking of stamps. And then those would then be placed into the album. And the other component was getting the supplements. Every year is like an annual ritual with my mom to get these supplements for the stamp album. And she was really generous with her time and her money, purchasing many of the new issues that were issued by the United States Postal Service. And so we would sit together periodically and put these in to their space in the album. So that's kind of what my story looked like. Pretty consistent story until, those high school years started to kick in and time was directed elsewhere. So I should have put like a black slide for like the black void that I feel like many of us get into from childhood until there's this revival. And so my stamp renaissance, as was mentioned in my intro blurb, was the acceptance of a collection that was passed to me by my grandmother-in-law, whose mother, it was her mother's collection. So I like to say it's my great-grandmother's collection. And it just really fascinated me because I've started to learn more about my wife's family history. And great grandma had a real big legacy in terms of United States history, going undercover as an FBI agent to infiltrate communist sects in California. And so she's got her history and her fame in that regard. But I get to learn more about her through her stamp collection. So in 2017, that's when things really got to pick up at age 35 again. And I'm just going through over the last couple of years all of this philatelic material that was left to me from her. But I think the biggest, most interesting connection here is great grandmother Edith was a postmaster, I guess you'd say a postmistress of a town in Arizona called Tombstone. So this is just a really fascinating place in the United States with a rich history, Western history. And so here's a cover that I have that was sent from Tombstone, and basically, or it was received in Tombstone. And if you look on the back, you get to see that here's the postmaster's signature, and this is great grandma Edith identifying herself as the postmaster. So this really again rekindled my interest in stamp collecting, and I really couldn't keep it to myself. And that's where my kids come in. I think we all can appreciate how our excitement can spill over onto our kids, for better or worse. And so here we are in 2017, again, the same year that great grandma's collection came to me. And this is when I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I was so excited to have gotten this collection early in the year that I was looking for outlets and ways to connect with other stamp collectors. And so stamp shows are a very logical place to do this and way to do this. So here are some photos from, yeah, this is my first stamp show. And my first stamp show was shared with my family. I was able to convince my wife and my 4-year-old and 2-year-old to come along with me. And we ended up walking the floor for a couple hours, which is pretty amazing for toddlers, I think. And here's Avery at age 4. And the response by the dealers and the fellow collectors was amazing. They were so kind to our family, and they were so kind to Avery. They were handing her these souvenir sheets. And then you find out that there are groups in Philately whose mission is to reach out to children. There are a lot of youth groups. And this really took me by surprise and was really amazing because they'll sit down with your child and they'll put a binder in front of your child with Disney stamps. And then Avery was able to use the stamp tongs, pull her stamps out, and then keep them for her collection at home. So that's one of my early experiences, kind of getting the kids involved in stamp collecting, was to take them to the Rocky Mountain Stamp Show. This is part of the World Series of Philately, so you may know this as ROMPEX if you're big into stamp shows. So it was just amazing because I really didn't know what kind of fun and what kind of activity there would be for a 4 and a 2-year-old at a stamp show. And for ROMPEX anyway, I'm sure many of them are like this. There was a lot to do, and it was quite exciting and engaging. So then a couple years went by, and the kids have always seen me working with my stamp collection here and there. And I think at 6 years old, with my oldest daughter going into kindergarten, it was time to have some one-on-one time with her. She was really showing interest in stamps, and so I was able to take her as my date to the stamp show. And we went right to the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library. They're the group that puts together the young collectors material, and they have just amazing material. So we spent, oh my gosh, it was so funny. We were probably there for 3 to 4 hours at this one table. Avery was riveted. I was having the time of my life there. It was just so fun. They have all of these different activities for kids to do to get them engaged and to get them to think about what's the content on the postage stamp, what's the real meaning, what can we learn from these paper artifacts. So we sat there and we went through all the handouts. Avery got to design her own page layout with Disney stamps from the Caribbean. They had juice, they had snacks. I mean, what more could a 6-year-old want? It was a great time. There's also exposure to all kinds of other activities when you go to a stamp show. There's a letterpress depot group that is there, and it's just amazing to see the outreach and the recognition that youth need to become engaged in order for these pursuits to continue to thrive in the future. So make your own greeting card was really pretty exciting and pretty fun. I mean, very hands-on. That's one of the themes of what I'm going to talk about today is getting your hands on things. So again, one of the things they did, they gave Avery a couple of dollars, like $5. They gave my kid money. I can't even believe how generous this group is. They gave her money and they said, go down to this dealer. He's got these red boxes and you can pick out some stamps you really like from around the world. And Avery really liked it. She really picked up on it and she went for it. She looked for what she was interested in. And that was a very exciting experience for us. And she got her first album. I mean, I don't know. I think we all appreciate as stamp collectors how exciting it is for kids to become involved. So this group had extra stamp albums to hand out. And so they gave Avery a stamp album. And now, every so often I'll give her stamps that I know she needs for her album. And she gets a chance to fill the spaces and find the stamp, put the hinge on the page. And that's really one of the things that we've been doing together last year. So 2019 is going pretty well. And I got a chance to go abroad, to go to the UK for an anatomy conference. And I was able to visit Stanley Gibbons. And I was able to get them, my daughters, a little souvenir. I was able to get them some little stock books and a couple of little packets of stamps. And so now periodically they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, Daddy, can we get our stamp collections out? And so for them, the excitement is they are taking a look at this bag of stamps. They're going through, they're checking out the imagery, they're reading the text, and they're putting it in the stock book. There's really no rhyme or reason, and that's fine. That's the purpose. They're just having a good time taking a look at these, and they'll find duplicates. They'll start sharing them with one another. It's really fascinating to see them do this. And for me, it's really fascinating to step back and put the brakes on and really let them figure out what they want to do. I don't need to put a bunch of boundaries and rules around this for them. I want them to feel like they're having fun doing what they want to do. So that's been pretty fun. And same at the end of 2019, I came across a little group called the Spellman Museum. And so they have a nice calendar that they put out every year, and they'll send it to you. If you sign up, you can go to their website. I'll give some more resources at the end of the talk here. And they really just do a good job, again, making stamp collecting accessible. And so together with my wife and my kids, we would look at the calendar, and if there was something that was remotely interesting to us, we would talk about it a little bit more. And then 2020, we are here in January, and I thought it was time to take the girls to the actual Young Collectors Club meetings. So this is not too far from our house, down in Denver, and we were able to go, and they set up programming. Again, this is at the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library, and you show up and they have a whole programming agenda set, and they have tons of activities. It's amazing the kind of work that they put into this. So this is a scavenger hunt that is a stamp hunt. So they'll dump a bunch of stamps into a box. They'll give the kids the blank form, and then the youth have to go through the box and find a stamp that meets the criteria. But don't worry, there was a slide presentation before this that showed them what's a coil stamp, what's a definitive stamp, and then they get to kind of search through it and learn a little bit of the terminology. And I didn't learn about this terminology until I was 10, 11, 12, and I'm still picking up this terminology at my age now into my 30s. So it was just really cool to see how youth can process all this information. And then they won't let you leave the Collectors Club without filling up a gallon-sized baggie with stamps from the donated stamp box. So that was pretty sweet, because that gives us material when we get home to go through and put in stock books, to talk about and put in stamp albums. It's been a real exciting time for sure. And then back to some of the activities, our girls happen to love playing the match game. You take all the cards, put them face down, and then you take turns flipping the tiles. And our sixth grader Avery, or not sixth grader, our 6-year-old Avery loves the match game. So what they did at the club meeting is they put all of the various stamp designs in pairs face down, mixed up, of course, and they had to do a real life match game. which was great. And our kids really enjoyed doing it. It was really fun. Also in that month, I asked I asked my younger daughter, Kayla, who's 4 years old. She goes to, she went at the time to a Montessori primary classroom, and Montessori is all about, experiencing the world around you, exploring, exploration. And so I thought that it would be interesting for them as they were going through a study on Asian culture, if they would like to learn a little bit more about the Lunar New Year. And they were learning about it. And I said, well, wait a minute. There's a stamp that's put out by the post office every year. And so my daughter's teacher said, yeah, why don't you come in? Parents are always encouraged to come in and show and tell and share things with the students. There's not very many students in the class. I picked up a souvenir sheet of the lunar stamp from 2020. And that week before I got there, the class had written letters. They got practice with where do you put the address, where do you put a return address, leave some space for the postage stamp. And then they wrote letters to whoever they wanted to, parents or grandparents. And then I got to come in and share with them this Lunar New Year stamp, the connection with what they were studying on Asia. And then I also brought some extra stamps, and they were just fascinated with these little pieces of paper. It was really fun. And so that was a way that I was able to engage with my children and actually their classmates as well. And then I had to take a look at what Avery was doing as she was approaching her 100 days of school. So she got her assignment from the kindergarten teacher that said, you have to find 100 items in your home and try to group them in a certain way. So, there may have been a little parental influence there. Hey, Avery, we've got a lot of postage stamps in this shoebox here. Do you think you could find groups of 10? And she went at it, and she found a bunch of airmail stamps here, some 3-cent George Washington stamps. We got a poster board, and it was her job to glue all these on the poster board. And then I turned around and came back, and she was doing something really interesting. She already knows who's on many postage stamps of the United States. And it's a great opportunity to connect and discuss. Well, Avery, who was George Washington? He was the first president. So it's a great way to engage and to teach and to learn about the world around us. And then I came back, and she had drawn this little diagram and labeled it Elizabeth. And I had to think for a while and ask her, well, what's going on here? Oh, well, these are the stamps with Elizabeth. Oh, okay, Queen Elizabeth II. When Daddy made the point that this is the only country in the world that doesn't have to put their name on the stamp, they've got the silhouette of Queen Elizabeth. So she already knows that a lot of stamps in the world have Queen Elizabeth on them. So a lot of fun and just really, really cool. And then she also knows that these are airplanes. And so this gets to go to the school, and it gets to hang up with all the other amazing collections that people have put together with household items. And then I think we all know what happened in March. The world changed, and we started to spend a lot more time at home. And we were starting to look at activities to keep our kids entertained, while educators were trying to flip education and figure out the best way to get the curriculum delivered at home. So, there were many times where they said, hey, we've got some time at home. What should we do? Let's go ahead and get our stamp collections out. So that was a lot of fun. And, they're really interested in getting these out. Again, it's not very polished and organized. Avery on the left here has her album, and we're waiting for the day where we can get an album for Kayla. But for now, filling a stock book and using her tongs is pretty fun for her. And then we got into the summer again. It was time to get the shoebox out. And this is one of my favorite things to do with the girls, is to soak the stamps. So we dump the shoebox in the water. We let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes. And then we start peeling the stamps off the paper. Now, I will say I do have to do a little bit of screening. And I do want to make sure that there's not anything that can be damaged by tiny little hands as they're taking the stamps off the paper. But for the most part, it's pretty foolproof. As if you look at this pile here, there's nothing remarkable in here. And it's just a lot of fun for them. And it gets them asking, again, questions about what they're seeing. And then Spelman Museum, they start sending us packets of stamps in the mail. So again, that's another great program that I'll mention to you guys as we come toward the end. And we just keep going through the months. And then in September, here's the Spelman package, and they'll send us first day covers. They'll send us the calendar again, and we get to again talk about what's going on that day in history. And then, what happens, I'm sure if you're an experienced stamp collector and you like to evangelize about your hobby, people start to realize that you're a good source for stamps that are in their lives or that come into their lives. So one of our neighbors in October, her father passed away and he had accumulated some stamps, and her immediate thought was, well, Mike and Avery and Kayla across the street are stamp collectors. I wonder if they would enjoy these collections. And so it's been really a great way to connect with neighbors and to talk about collections and what they meant to the loved one. And so it was really neat. And here's Avery and I kind of taking a look at what was given to us. It was a real generous gesture for sure. And then coming into November, again, more time at home. You can see that the trend here is more time at home, and we're coming into the holiday season. And, we're going to have a lot more time at home. I guess depending on where you live, there will be the ability in some places to have interactions across generations. And so there's just going to be a lot of time to interact with people and think about what you can do with that time. So we've been spending a lot of time on these things. And then, something will come home from school. There'll be an assignment for our Northwestern native peoples. And I'm looking at this and like, wait a minute, I just saw this in the new releases of the USPS for 2021. So we get to kind of talk about the crossover and how important these things are to our country and in our lives. And we get to just have a good kind of connection between what they're learning at school and what's going on nationally. So that was pretty exciting. And then, of course, the holidays come, and we happen to be one of those families that have two elves come to our house every year. And these elves like to position themselves in a different location every evening. And it just so happens that Jingle and Bell decided to get Avery and Kayla's stamp stock books out and go through the collections on the kitchen counter. So the girls know you cannot touch the elf. The magic will go away, and they're here and they're getting involved in the stamp collection as well. So that's the end of the first part. That was just a good exercise that I had over the last, several weeks, thinking about, well, what's my experience been like as a collector? What was that like when I was young? And what does that look like for the young people around me? And it's almost kind of like working backwards, because these things are happening, but why are we doing these things? Why am I spending time doing this? What are some potential gains? And I think when I was going through these potential reasons, some of them are intentional, but we have something in academia called the hidden curriculum. So these are unintended benefits that come out of exposing young people to stamp collecting. So there are many more, I'm sure, than what I'm going to present. And that's what I need your help with. I need you to contribute your thoughts in the chat. Please bring this up in the Q&A. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. And I will start with one of my favorites. What I studied for my doctoral work was fine motor control. So I'm very interested in hand function. I'm very interested in the development of hand function. And I've seen my kids have become very adept at manipulating small objects, and that really carries over from stamp collecting. So manipulating small objects, this is a very critical ability and benefit when you think about the skill of writing. If you've got a child not quite to kindergarten and you feel like stamp collecting is a little too early, I wouldn't worry about that, because just them handling the postage stamp, I think we all know how challenging it can be to put that stamp like in the stock book. That's not always an easy victory there, even for adults. So it's been really fun to see them use stamp tongs as well. And it was an immediate connection to the Montessori method as well. So just a couple of quotes here from Maria Montessori: what the hand does, the mind remembers. So I really think there's going to be a strong connection for my kids where they're manipulating these stamps. And I remember that duck hunting stamp of my grandfather's. And I think that helps me remember him. And I think that just helps me remember and get excited about stamp collecting. And Dr. Montessori also said, the human hand allows the mind to reveal itself. So, I mean, I'm just very hand-centric and hand-fascinated. And I really think that working with postage stamps is a great extension of this. I think another benefit is, of course, the quality time aspect. So there's a strong link between engaging one-on-one with children and positive outcomes for them. So whether these are your own children or whether you're volunteering with another group with other children, I think that this represents quality time, because you can easily spend 15 minutes to 3 hours on this kind of activity. And you have to kind of be in close quarters. You're usually gathered around a table. So I think it's a really good way to get some quality time in. I also think that there's a benefit of developing the recognition of uniqueness in many ways. So we're going to see when we're looking at postage stamps with kids that there's diversity between countries. Of course, there's even diversity within countries. And then when you look at what the kids gravitate to, my two daughters are not going for the same stamps. Avery will go for horses, and Kayla is gravitating toward like minerals and gemstones and flowers. It's really interesting. So they get to recognize that Avery has these interests and Kayla has these interests. And these differences are really manifested and kind of showcasing individuality. And that's really huge for the second child. I feel like the second child really just tries to copy and do everything the first child does, but I'm really seeing uniqueness develop and kind of assertiveness in my second child as a consequence of looking at these different things. Curiosity, as if you really need to promote curiosity at ages 2, 3, and 4. I mean, the kids are just so curious. And there's no shortage of questions when we're looking at postage stamps. What is this color? Who is this person? Why do we have this on a postage stamp? What are these why is there gum on the back? I mean, they just keep going and going and going. And that line of inquiry is huge for learning. And I think we can easily appreciate that happening when looking at postage stamps. And this one came to my attention a couple of years ago. I went through a book by Cal Newport that I recommend called Digital Minimalism. It really is just an acknowledgement of how addicted we are to digital devices in our life and the toll that that's taking on us, and how in order to break free from that, we need to do some intentional leisure, and it needs to be analog. It's kind of a play off of digital, addiction really, and going away from that, and the opposite is analog, of course. So we can kind of reduce our dependency. Oh man, when education went to remote, our kids' screen time increased 3,000% because we really withheld screen time from them as recommended by pediatric associations. And so this is, again, an activity. What can we do with our kids that's not on an iPad, on a TV, on a computer? When you get the stamp book out, it's all analog. And there are many benefits that are detailed in Cal Newport's work. But again, it gets us away from screen time. And I think that's a really good thing for kids. Cool. So thanks for letting me share those benefits that I perceive and that I've observed from working on stamp collecting with my kids. I also got to reflect on what are some benefits that I perceive I gained from being a stamp collector as a child as well. And those are reflected in those. So I'm looking forward to discussing with you what you came up with. And then in the last few minutes here, I want to address that third objective. I want to just give you some practical steps that you can take to engage youth in the hobby. Again, whether these are your own children, relatives, neighbors, just a great way to get them involved. So I have to lead with one of the most influential, and that's the local Young Collectors Club. For us, it's the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library. They have a Young Collectors group and they meet every month. And so I will point you towards stamps.org for the APS resources. Here's their direct link to their page where you can look for clubs that are near you. So you may be able to find a youth collectors club near you. And then you may also want to consider philatelic libraries. I had no idea what a philatelic library was until a couple of years ago. And they are there to help you connect with your hobby. So many philatelic libraries, I'm sure, beyond Denver are going to have youth programming and youth resources. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. I would also encourage you to take a look at a group that is not local, but one whose mission is all about outreach and connecting people with postal history. The Spellman Museum, they're based out of Massachusetts. However, there's their URL, and they have a youth stamp collecting club. And essentially what happens by signing up for this club, you get a packet of stamps every month. You saw photos in my first part of my talk of my girls interacting with those. The monthly stamp calendar comes as well. We actually got ours today. That when I went to the mailbox, that came today. And they also send informational materials on collecting. And they really make it kid friendly and accessible. And it's really a lot of fun to go through those materials with our kids. And then if you want to get on to this club, you're going to want to email info@spellman.org. Let them know you're interested in the youth stamp collecting club, and they'll get you connected. And related to Spellman, they have a YouTube channel, and it's called Going Postal. Here's a screenshot of their channel. So you'll go to youtube.com, you'll search for Going Postal, you'll find them. And it's basically a monthly program. And they talk about stamp collecting, postal history. Henry Lucas is the host, and he does a phenomenal job. He's the director of the Spellman Museum, and it's a phenomenal program. They've got tons of videos, so you can look at what's new, but you've also got a backlog to binge on. And I mean, they have a hand puppet named Archie the alligator. This is like Sesame Street meets stamp collecting, and it's fantastic, and it's very well done, and they're really doing a great service for outreach to the hobby. And the APS is doing a very good job as well. They've got their whole webpage dedicated to youth in philately, Young Stamp Collectors of America, targeting ages 6 through 17. They also provide information through a monthly newsletter, and they also give access. You heard Heidi mention the C3A learning platform. You also have access to that being a member. And much like Spellman, stamps come in the mail. A treasure package is what the APS calls their delivery, and there's a very minimal fee for this. So I actually learned a little bit more about this as I was researching for the presentation. So maybe Santa Claus will give them a membership in their stockings this year. We'll have to see how good they've been. Stamp shows are great resources. I've already mentioned that early in the talk and how influential and beneficial those were for me. And so what I would direct you to do is go to, again, stamps.org and take a look at their calendar. You will have to admit and acknowledge that the calendars are very sparse to keep people safe with the global pandemic that's going on. Many are virtual, and hopefully we'll be able to get back together in person. However, virtual stamp shows are probably here to stay, right? We've seen good things with those. And you can also go to a lot of the mini stamp collecting forums. They also have calendars. And that's just a way for you to figure out when stamp shows are. So that is something that I found I needed to do. It took a little bit of digging to find out when stamp shows were happening. And I really hope you get to do that soon with your youth. So I need to get more involved in post-crossing. Every podcast I'm listening to, every Facebook group I'm a member of, it's all about post-crossing. And I think maybe there's some data behind, like there's an increase in usage of post-crossing during COVID time. So it's your basic postcard exchange, but on digital steroids, right? So you get to see the postcards that are coming to you. You get to track them. They're all individually identified, connect to the world via real mail. It's kind of a hybrid between digital and analog. So be careful. Don't go too crazy with all this digital stuff, but it's a nice use of the platform. Now, when I do need to mention though, however, this is probably more something that an adult would do with a child. I don't think that the child would do this on their own, because if you're under 13, post-crossing requires adult supervision. So I'm trying to get some postcards around the house, and then I'll be able to send some out. I've already got a account here, and it will be really fun, I think, to do this with my kids. This one I just noticed in one of the recent podcasts or YouTube channels. There's so many now. It's great. I can't remember which. It's called Club for the Future. This looks like a Bezos, a Jeff Bezos brainchild, an Amazon thing. And basically you send a postcard into space. It's very much a space awareness campaign. And the postcards that they receive are going to be shot into space on one of the Blue Origin New Shepard rockets, whatever that is. And then that will receive a flown in space mark on it once it returns to the surface of the Earth. So that looks really neat. That looks really interesting. If you've got somebody in your life that is interested in space, which I think most children have a space phase, this would be a really cool thing to check out, clubforfuture.org. Cool, guys. Well, thanks for hanging in there with me. I know it's been very unidirectional. I want to wrap up and discuss with you. I hope that at this point you're able to reflect on your own experience with stamp collecting, if you did as a child, or what you're doing with your children right now, if you are doing so. I hope you can maybe list a couple of reasons why stamp collecting is beneficial for youth. And then lastly, I would hope that you can name some examples of activities, resources available to engage youth in stamp collecting. And if you can do all that, then I've done my job here. You're going to want to go to Linktree to look at my Philatelic, basically my Philatelic resources. And I will go ahead and land here. Thanks for your attention. The link to the slides, again, is here. There's my email address. And the floor is yours. I am ready for your questions and comments.
That was that was so terrific. You were so holistic with that. I was just saying the other day how I was a Montessori learner, much to the laughter of my coworkers. But truly, would you like to, because I worked in a Montessori classroom for a while, and so I have noticed that fine motor skill. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the emphasis in Montessori training is like learning by doing and manipulation, learning math with blocks and things like this. So I didn't really get into a lot of detail about the science behind it, but it's just such a logical connection because there are so many tools involved in stamp collecting. There's the magnifying glass, there's the stamp tongs. I mean, it's a pretty endless list of things that can be used, and things that if you have been exposed to them early enough, or even if you need to have a beginning exposure, they're quite capable of using. So that's been a real nice extension from what our kids were already interested in.
And then the unlimited learning opportunities as well.
Absolutely. It's all about learning about the world around you in the Montessori model. And stamps are a portal to that directly, I think.
The endless questions, as you had said, that was really fantastic. I'm sorry, somehow I lost the screen here. There we are. Just the endless, how it can lead to the endless questioning. As you said, you see a stamp. What sort of, can you give us an example of like maybe a memorable chain of a conversation you had with your daughter?
Yeah, we watched Pocahontas, the Disney classic. And that immediately triggered in my mind the early 20th century series, John Smith, Pocahontas. And so kind of like bringing that out. And it's like, hey, you remember that movie we watched the other night? Did you know Pocahontas was on a postage stamp? And so here you go. And like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look like Pocahontas. Why is Pocahontas wearing a top hat? And well, she was taken to England. Oh, why was she taken to England? Why did they? I mean, it really quickly transformed from here's a picture of somebody from a Disney movie to like, they were asking me these really tough questions. And that's the beauty of children, is they always force us to learn. So I'm trying to answer these questions, and almost daily we come to the conclusion, I don't know. You can role model not knowing. That's an important thing for people in general to learn, is that not everyone knows everything. So I don't know, and let's go online and find the answer. So that's one recent example for sure.
If for anyone who receives the Stamp Chat newsletter that I send out every 2 weeks, you'll know that I hit on curiosity constantly. And so what a great, how have your daughters, have you noticed a change since they began collecting?
I don't know if it's reasonable to expect, because I mean, collecting is just one facet of their lives. So, I mean, I don't think that I could completely say that there's a big change. Everything's kind of incremental. but I am seeing examples of things like somebody will post on social media saying, I asked my 13-year-old to help me mail some envelopes, and they put the postage stamp on the back of the envelope. Or, I mean, my kids know where postage stamps go on letters. And our emphasis this month, my wife had this brilliant idea, for our countdown to Christmas, it's acts of kindness. So one of those acts of kindness is to write a letter to grandmother, great grandma in Arizona, who's 102 years old this year. Let's write her a letter. And so, they already know what that's all about. They understand that. They appreciate that aspect, I think. And whenever we go to the mailbox, they're very excited to know if they got anything in the mail. So that's what I remember as a child as well. Did I get anything in the mail? There's something powerful about that, I think. And I think maybe many children are not getting that.
And I'm happy that you said that, it's an incremental change, but as I'm that analog in reintroducing or actively making analog time in your family. How has that been as a family?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we're fortunate in that we are aware of these benefits, and we have the ability to take a time out and like really we have access to Montessori education. I mean, not everyone's as blessed as we are in that regard. So it's been a pretty logical fit for us, and both being related to healthcare and being aware of pediatric guidelines. And yeah, it's been a real nice fit and a real logical, transition for us to try to seek out activities that are analog. And yeah, I just think that they're going to benefit greatly from all of this, analog experience. And yeah, I mean, we're going to see where it goes. I mean, that's the exciting thing about parenting, right? Like you can talk all you want to talk, right? But you have to see like where things go. And at least for our perspective, we want to know what the target is and the distance, so that way we can aim at the target, and that kind of informs what our approach is for sure.
It's exciting to be sure to even imagine just and as a parent, I am really impressed by what you're giving your children. I think it was such a comprehensive presentation as well. And I would like to just let folks that will be watching this on YouTube know that you in the comment section, you have definitely re-inspired. We've got parents online, we've got teachers, we've got grandparents. So thank you for that. Where is for our friends who are re-inspired, where could you suggest, or where have you gotten your stamps? Have you ever been able to get big bulks of stamps? I work at the APS, so that's what I see, but where do you get yours other than the neighbor?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the neighbor. Gosh, yeah, I mean, just letting people know that we do this, they'll tear stamps off of envelopes for us. I will say that the double-edged sword here is I am not a fan of self-adhesive stamps. I've not figured out a very clean way to get them off. And I don't want to go down, this trail and open this can of worms, but I've been fortunate in that there have been some people that have gotten wind of what we're doing, and they're like, oh, my mother was a stamp collector, and really she was a stamp hoarder. So she would tear the stamps off from these commemoratives from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and we're talking a massive shoebox. So I really haven't had to go out and purchase a lot of postage stamps. I will say a lot of them do come from the Philatelic Library and the Young Collectors Club. The Spellman group, they send, there's like 10 or 15 stamps in every package. So that's pretty good. That's really cool. And that's really where we're sourcing a lot of our stamps. I really haven't sat down with the kids with a bunch of self-adhesive stamps. I'm kind of like, I don't know where to go there. I just see my kids with that orange scented spray hitting each other in the face with it. I mean, it's pretty messy. So we're really focusing on that water activated gum and soaking stamps off the paper. Yeah.
Have the children been? I wasn't clear. Have the children been able to have like a play date? Have you been able to host any other kids to experience this?
No, that's interesting. I mean, there was going into the classroom in a sense. That was kind of a massive play date with a bunch of 4-year-olds. But no, I don't think that the girls have brought this up. I mean, we don't have a lot of people over anymore, but we definitely had a lot of play dates, and they never said, come look at my stamp collection. So there are other things to play with for sure, but that's definitely an option in the future, I hope, and we'll see where that goes. I don't know if anyone that's listening in has any experience with that, but no, it's always been in-house for us.
I'm looking at the chat box and it says, of course, local stamp clubs are a huge resource for shoeboxes full of stamps on paper. So for any of you that are interested, that's for certain. The APS receives routine calls of where to people can donate. So definitely check out you can find clubs at stamps.org under the community tab. What have you thought about? Are your girls really into albums? Have you begun to think, have they delved in, like, when we talk about youth and philately, sometimes we get stuck in like, okay, are kids still going to be collecting in albums? Have you thought beyond? I'm just curious. There's the albums, very analog, as you say, and then there's the digital collection. So on social media, especially Instagram, it's almost like online collections. Have you thought that far in the future?
No, I haven't seen that. I haven't had an interest in that. I haven't seen examples of that. And I know that for me, the album was real exciting because, there's some of that genetics of collecting, right? Where there's bringing order to chaos and there's filling the space. So I think I'm interested in seeing where that goes with children, because there's definitely a big push right now in all of the young professionals that are on YouTube and on social media to kind of de-emphasize, like, there's one right way to collect stamps. There are these rules and thou shalt follow these rules. That's a big turnoff for the millennial generation, right? So there's this de-emphasis of the rules. And so that's kind of how I'm playing it with them. It's like, here is a stock book. Here is a bag of stamps. Here are some tongs. These are the things you have to work with. What do you want to do? And then we did get an album at the stamp show. So it's a little bit of both. Like, here's an album and then here's a stock book. And that's about as far as I've taken it, really.
Very Montessori approach, Dr. Pascoe. Yeah, let the child lead the discovery.
That's right. I forgot about that. You're absolutely right.
There's so many people, again, on the chat, and for our friends that are watching on YouTube, we apologize. I am trying to get you into this conversation, but I would like you to know, Dr. Pascoe, that Graham Beck is on the call, of the creator of Exploring Stamps, and he is singing your praises. And he also, loves that you want to de-emphasize the rules.
Yeah.
So, and we have
Graham who?
Graham Beck.
Yeah,
Graham, very good. And another person on the line who's from the First Day Cover Society, the Postal History Foundation in Tucson can provide quantities of stamps for new collectors. They are one of the few organizations still accepting donations of used on-paper stamps. So again, friends, that is the Postal History Foundation of Tucson. Thank you for that information.
Yeah, we love Arizona. That's where great grandma was a postmistress in Tombstone. And I found all this material, in her collection. There was a pamphlet from the Arizona Philatelic Society. And it's like, wow, like, what was she involved? I'm just trying to learn more about her involvement. And I'm putting together a philatelic genealogy on her. And I think it will be cool for my kids to learn about great great grandma through these actual physical artifacts. I think it'll be really fun for them.
Tom Horn, who was with the APS, and I believe, and Cheryl Gantz as well, they teach in the event that you or anyone on this call would be interested in the genealogy using postal history. It's fantastic. So what have you been, you had mentioned, and it was great to see Going Postal on your presentation. What other YouTube channels or podcasts would you recommend for people on the line here?
Yeah, I regularly frequent Exploring Stamps. You're going to want to check that one out, Going Postal. And then on my rotation for podcasts, I have Conversations with Philatelists. That's in the mix, as well as Stamp Show Here Today. They're a little bit more colorful crew out there in Nevada, so you'll enjoy their banter, I'm sure. And I would say that what you're going to want to do to get the full list, because I'm sure I'm forgetting, and if you want to discover more to come, go to my Linktree URL, go to the Philatelic Wiki. You know what? Let's make this live here. That's one of my bookmarks here. So I'm a big advocate of crowdsourced knowledge. So here's a Philatelic Wiki, and I have all my URLs organized. So here are the podcasts: Stamp Show Here Today, Conversations with Philatelists. There's my own podcast, and then there's Stamp Stories. This is for those that are maybe a Canadian collectors. He does a great job there. And then just under that are my YouTube connections. And it looks like I pretty much nailed it. I pretty much nailed the main ones that are out there. I feel like more and more come on board every month. So that's, you're going to want to check out the Philatelic Wiki for sure.
I was just staring at that list. There's another philatelist. He runs the Paleo Philately group. Michael Kogan. Also, the two of you really need to talk. He also has like a complete database of Paleo Philately. So you two are total gems for the hobby.
I put the URL. Good. There's a URL in the chat, which folks can click on. I'm pretty sure that'll get you there.
And we'll be sure to include that in the APS YouTube version of this presentation. Just making a note.
Sure. There is a question: have I found a list of philatelic museums that have a youth program? I have not, or philatelic libraries. I must have found out about Spellman either on a podcast or as I was getting into groups in Facebook. I mean, that's kind of the struggle here, is I don't always remember where these things came from. So sorry, Gary, I don't have a list, but maybe there's something here on the Philatelic Wiki if you want to peruse that.
It is your site is fantastic for anyone on the line or watching this on YouTube. Please share this with your club, share this with anyone that's involved in youth leadership. This is really an excellent presentation, and you can feel your passion for it and such a freshness too, Dr. Pascoe. As I mentioned, you guys have known me. I've been doing these stamp chats for quite a while. And when the presentation like this hits me, I get excited, and I was in the classroom as well. And this is exactly what we need to see more of. And I look forward to using your presentation as a resource to get young philatelists engaged. Looks like good when we're getting thank you from about to look at your wiki list from a participant. Anyway, that flew by, and that was so fun. And will you please post more stories of where could Bell and Jingle end up?
Oh man, could they make another philatelically theme?
Yes.
They're always listening, so I'm sure they're hearing us, and I don't know. We'll see what they can come up with. They're pretty creative.
That's right. We have to call on the special phone, and I understand. And what did I want to say? Oh, I said I really hope that Santa does put the youth club in their stocking for this Christmas. So, of all children, they deserve it. My goodness, that was so fun to watch them. Before we sign off, I would just like to let people know that as the chat's coming in, Wisconsin Federation of Stamp Clubs, they are a website to check out for stamps or youth resources. Again, that's Wisconsin Federation of Stamp Clubs. And then in our friends in Latin America, they have a fantastic, I think they've been going on like 270 days straight, correct me. Sorry if I'm doing the numbers wrong, but Mi Oficina Philatelic Society that also has resources, and the ATA, of course, the American Topical Association. Anyway, I'm sure we will continue this conversation. Keep it rolling in the comments section on the APS YouTube channel. This will be uploaded very soon. We really thank you so much for your energy and this brilliant presentation. Thanks so much to all of our friends on the line as well, and for your comments. Excellent talk, excellent talk. So saith the chat box. Thank you so much. Today's Stamp Chat was sponsored by the APS Education Department. The Education Department provides videos, learning modules, and teaching resources for philatelists of all ages and collecting levels. Member exclusive video content is available on Classroom C3A, and it's one of the many benefits when you become a member of the APS Society. Visit stamps.org/learn to learn more about what we're doing for online education and become a member today, stamps.org. To stay up to date with what's to come on APS Stamp Chat, subscribe to our newsletter. You can find that on stamps.org. Be sure to subscribe to our APS YouTube channel where you'll get notifications when we have a new Stamp Chat up on air and ready for you to watch, either in a premiere or whenever you can, and keep the conversation going. As I said, use the comment box below. We monitor that. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Stamp Chat. Until then, connect, collect, find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and of course on stamps.org. Social since 1886. That is the American Philatelic Society. I'm Heidi Rhodes. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much, Dr. Pascoe. Great presentation.
Thank you.